Welcome everybody to Beyond the Blocks. I'm here with a special guest today, Harvey Rayner. Harvey and I have had a couple different, chats on different episodes of my podcast and now on this podcast. And he has a special drop coming this week that I wanted to have him on and chat about. Welcome, Harvey.
Hey man, good to speak with you again. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's always great. I always think whenever we have, get on a show together or just chat, I always just enjoy talking with you. I think you are just a really interesting person, have really great insights into a lot of different things, art, life, beyond. So I always enjoy having you on the show and chatting with you. Let's start out talking about, let's jump right into your new project. I think we can start with that. It's called Amplitudes of Canvas. It's going to be released on Art Block Studio on the 20th, which is coming up. Tell us about it.
So let's start with the name maybe. So the name came from this idea of, let me go back a little bit. So it was a derivative of an early vellum fork. There was a fork of vellum that always interested me. I kind of put it aside because I wanted to re-explore it at some point. So I picked that back up in, I think, May, and that fork had a very sort of landscape kind of feel, in the sense it had this kind of like receding depth to it. It almost looked like fields kind of receding backwards. But once I started to play with this project and kind of like morph these primitives and kind of move them around, they struck me as if they were kind of like actual kind of, maybe they could have been made of canvas themselves, They had this kind of material property in the same way vellum did. I mean, like that piece you see there, it's kind of a little bit more kind of pop-eye, but basically these primitives had this kind of like fabric quality to them. So, I came up with this basic idea of this. I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a silly idea, but it was like the first idea I had about the project, which is this landscape inversion, where you've got this motif in art where you've got landscape painted onto canvas. This is landscape made from canvas. So, it's just a little play on words, and that kind of just the name just came out of that. Obviously the amplitudes, the waves, and it was going to be Amplitudes of Linen for a while. And then, I sometimes spend a long time thinking about different names. The key thing with a name is, like, I have to be able to say the name to my parents and people who don't know anything about art. Well, I wouldn't say that about my dad. My dad's a real enthusiast now, but and not feel embarrassed. And yet have, and I've sort of started to move away from single word names, just because it's hard to get any poetry and sort of tension and mystery in a single word. So that was the basic, starting point of the project. And then the project became much more kind of gestural, or at least some of the outputs. And that was because, I really I like this kind of motif in painting where, where you can go, you can go and see a Rembrandt, right? And you can, if you get close, you can see these very thick painterly markings, where it's very clear that the artist is left, sort of reveals, the process which they use to make the painting, and yet you step back and you don't really see them so much. You just see this kind of more sort of illusionistic space. So the markings are there to kind of remind the viewer that this is actually a flat surface. This is the truth of actually what we're looking at is a flat surface. This is made from paint. So the gestural markings I have in my work, I wanted to kind of keep. If you look closely, they're actually made from dashed lines. Everything in this thing is basically a stroke or a dot, and the same with the canvas, or little dashes. And so I wanted to keep that. I didn't want it to make it even more sort of painterly in that sense. I wanted to keep the primitive of the SVG kind of stroke, the dash stroke. So it's kind of like a, it's like an equivalent of of that kind of tension between a thick painted mark and an illusionistic space. Well, not that this is really a sort of like, it's not really realism or anything, but and some of the outputs, there's a real sense of depth, or at least I try to create that. Maybe like here, if you look at the top right hand corner, how it kind of like recedes back.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely see that.
And so, you know, it's a play with using the gestures to kind of like, you know, kind of in that way. And also, as the project evolved, it became, I feel, a lot more sort of expressionistic. You know, it's something I really have sort of been working on for the last year, sort of especially over the winter and with this project, trying to actually create, you know, a strong sense of mood and emotion, you know, in some of the outputs.
Yeah.
And gesture is an obvious way to do that, you know, because it's so, when we look at gesture, you know, like this one.
That's a great one.
Gesture is so kind of like, it's abstract in a sense, right? But
Yeah.
in another sense, it's representational of something that a human makes with their body. And if you're doing this, right, you can't uncouple that from an emotional response, you know, it's kind of more violent. This one doesn't have any sort of like those extra gestural markings, but there's a lot of flow and movement in it. So I like this output.
Yeah, it's interesting like that. You know, going through them, I definitely see, you know, both, you know, and I think that, yeah, it's really interesting. Like I definitely see some expressionism in this as well, but you know, some of the other outputs I'm seeing are not, they're a little bit more, I don't know what, I guess
mellow.
Yeah, I guess that's what the word is, you know,
less mad. Yeah,
exactly. So it's nice that you got a range here, right?
Yeah,
which is cool.
Yeah, the range is really increasingly like important to me. Like this is why I feel like in this project, this is where I've pushed my own boundary, right? I've extended the space of variety. For sure, this is the most varied project I've built. So, and you know,
because when I link back to your work, like, I wouldn't describe expressionism is not something that I feel like you have in the past leaned into a lot.
With Vellum, I had this idea that, you know, I had this idea of what would happen if you took two visual languages from the 20th century, like expressionism and pop art in that case, and melded them together. So with Vellum, you know, you got these sort of very sort of like crisp bound outlines and things like this, which really flatten the canvas. This more leans into the expressionism, which is like a movement I would say is my favorite movement from the last century. Although, you know, it's hard for me to like say that, okay, there's a single piece that really stands out. I mean, if I list my top 20 favorite pieces from the last century, none of them will be expressionistic, you know, abstract expressionism. But I still really like the movement. I like the story of the movement. I like the characters. I like what they were trying to do. You know, trying to express something in purely abstract means it's not easy. But I think when it's done well, then somehow not having sort of representational elements on the canvas it provides a different sort of like route into people's
I think
I'd say.
I it's my favorite movement, definitely, and inspires a lot of my art. I think the key, I think what they were trying to do, which is, I think, interesting and true, is kind of this thought that the deepest, you know, I guess emotions or, you know, feeling that humans can have is it's in the sublime, right? And it's it's actually beyond words and in form and things like that. So I think they were really just focused on, okay, it's almost like this, you know, can we get to something where we're communicating in art that's, you know, trying to unleash almost that you know, sublime level of our feeling, right? That is beneath consciousness, really, or at least, our conscious reality, right? It's kind of feeding that conscious reality, but it's you know, it's underneath that, it's sub that, it's not completely accessible in reason or in language.
Right. No, I totally agree with that, and I think it's fundamentally why I've always been drawn to abstract art.
Yeah.
From a young age. Of course, I've done some figurative stuff, but generally, I'm a bit of an abstract maxi.
Yes. And this is beautiful. Like this is, like this, even this output is just like, I really love it. And it's got a mixture of, like I said, it's got that chaotic element to it in some ways, but it's also got, it's definitely has these waveforms that are, you can totally see going through this canvas. You have kind of this, checkerboard floor, which I know you've used that motif, in your work before. It's something that is kind of, I wouldn't say a signature, but it's something definitely I've seen you use before, and it's really cool. So, and you also have captured this sense of depth with that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a good way to kind of like, it's almost like it gives these, they're almost like some of these, although it started off as a landscape project, some of these things almost became like, they kind of remind me of almost like figures, kind of like leaning. And the floor plane just really creates this space for them to live in, right?
Yeah.
And you can do that in very sort of like simple, like Francis Bacon, he had these very sort of like line elements that would just create this space for his kind of characters to live in, and it opened up, really. It's almost like creates this little box for them to live in. And also like the floor plane, the fact that some of them are checkered. Well, I mean, they're all kind of checkered, sometimes, but I liked how that felt to me. It felt to me like some of them anyway. It looked like they reminded me of like like a Victorian hospital rooms or like asylums, and this other theme which came into the work of kind of like this kind of theme of some of the outputs are very sort of dark and
like I was gonna say. I was like, this one, it's a little bit. It's definitely a dark output.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazed, insane. I wanted them to look like asylums. Some of them almost,
Yeah.
Which is, the project has a spectrum. I mean, it's one end of the spectrum is this kind of, but in this one doesn't has the floor plane, but it doesn't have that kind of.
Yeah, no, this one's the opposite. This one is very, I don't think this is a dark output at all. I think this is actually very the opposite. Light, airy.
I wanted to float, that spectrum.
Well, I think it's interesting how our brains, it's like see figures, right? And that's something in generative art, since the beginning, I guess, it's almost, you have this Rorschach test element to it that even all the collectors, lean into, where you have people seeing certain things and certain outputs, and oh, I see this, and this is the goose, and it's it's completely sometimes, a lot of times, not intended by the artist at all, right? It's just it just happens to have that, and then someone identifies some form in it and then says, oh, that's that, and everyone's like, oh yeah, it looks like that, okay.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting, because as an abstract artist, it's usually something that you try to avoid.
Yeah.
Like there's this story of like Picasso and Braque when they were together when they were working on Cubism, and Braque had spent like a month making this piece, and Picasso walked in and said, "Oh no, I see a pigeon," and I think it was a pigeon. It's something like that. And in the end, Braque had to kind of like work to get rid of it, but it was hard. He kept thinking so. But yeah, I do like some of the outputs. Yeah, I've in this space, I would lean into it a little bit and allow those things through, because, like you say, they people really seem to it can become like a meme almost.
Yeah, exactly. It is. And then let's talk about the text, because I love this thing you added here, and it also looks really great and accurate. It looks like graphite. So
Yes, so this is actually modeled on my own handwriting. I obviously built an algorithm to model my handwriting. I've tried with this project. I tried so many different ways to add text to the work. I've always been interested in combining text and art, but it's very difficult to do in the sense that if it's like a font, if it's like a clean font, nearly always the work ends up looking a bit posterish.
yeah,
Which is not necessarily a problem. I mean, I like the sort of like, I particularly like post-war kind of like posters. I like that aesthetic.
yeah,
I like commercial art from the last century. So, but with this project, I didn't really want that vibe, and so eventually I grabbed some sort of cursive handwriting just from the internet, and I put behind some pieces. I really like that. So I thought, I'm going to have to commit to actually making an algorithm which is kind of like, it wasn't a huge job, but it took a good week to kind of like build all that out, I guess, and get it. So, but the text actually doesn't say anything, although they're not just random letters. There's structure. You can't just if you just randomly put letters in a word, they don't look like English.
yeah,
so,
yeah.
So there's certain groupings of consonants and vowels and stuff that make it look real. Well, there's a word down at three something, yeah. So, but I didn't want it to really say anything, because primarily the text is there to create a different type of texture,
Yes.
And again, it creates this sort of like, you've got this abstract element to the work. You've got this realism spec with, the floor plane, creates this kind of almost like this kind of different type of feeling, and then you've got the text, which is a different type of texture. It's almost impossible to see text. It just adds another dimension because it's a different type of thing.
Yeah.
So and then some of them have the text around the outside, some of them have these kind of text over the top, which kind of almost looks like somebody's erased some of the artwork.
Yeah, it looks like that.
Like
like this one.
And I like that kind of. It created another. The erasing kind of created another texture.
Yeah, it's almost like whiteout.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's like eraser, but also whiteout. And I don't know. I like this that you added this. It really adds to some of these outputs, and it embraces that chaotic element that you're bringing to this series. So I think it's really a great taste. Like on Art Blocks, I don't know if you remember, but it released shortly after my project in 2021. But the Letters to My Future Self by Brian Struhl, I think his name is. But I love that project. Something about, and I mean, it goes back into Vera Molnar, right? Letters to her mother, basically, is I think the writing style of this in generative art and emulating writing is pretty cool. Like I think it immediately, when you see it, it just invokes a very specific emotion, or it brings a human quality to the work that and it's especially impressive when you are doing it in a generative art sense, where it's computer generated, right? It's creating that dichotomy of human and machine, which and that play on that, which is just I think one of the main powerful things about generative art, right?
I love that tension between the human and the machine, and when you like, I really love to try and make stuff that looks like it's maybe been made by hand, and when I show people from outside of Web3 my work, and I don't say how it's made, and they look at a few pieces and they're like, oh, this is kind of interesting. This is nice. This is obviously, and then I say, oh, it's actually made from code, and their mind is like, what? Really? Like,
Yeah.
And there's something magic there, and I still think this is still an untapped. I still feel Gen art can be to many art lovers outside of Web3 can still be completely mind blowing. This is it's almost like Gen art is, went through this little period a few months ago, even though it was, Gen art's dead. Well, it's only just
started
because most of the world don't know that you can even make art with code.
And how do you feel like, because this is like, it's the perennial debate. I think it hasn't been talked about in a while on crypto Twitter or whatever, but it's definitely in the artist community, this debate where, this type of art, the type that I've mostly done and you've mostly done is this skeuomorphic, like you're saying, of kind of trying to emulate, physical techniques or, different, making pieces look, like you're saying, handmade. I think there's another subset of artists that actually think that is, I don't know, looking backwards is kind of how they would maybe say it, of not embracing the medium fully of digital art. And, they would say that, we need to embrace the medium and kind of do something radically different rather than emulating physical work. What do you think on that? Like, what would be your answer to that?
Right. Yeah, I've actually like in the description of the work, there's actually a chapter about this, and I was one of those artists who railed against it originally, and I actually went to the point of writing an essay about it. But in the course of writing the essay, I kind of convinced myself, because I always try to steal men the opposite perspective, and I thought, actually, I actually want to have a go at this now, because fundamentally, like, if you look at not this house but the house I live in, it's full of these kind of worn textures. I used reclaimed materials to build that house, and I love to live around old surfaces that tell a story about, and have a history. And so when I started to try it, like with Fontana, just with the kind of like the texture in the back, I realized actually, okay, this is actually a pure algorithmic process to make these worn textures, because in reality, like the worn, I always pick up a cup and say, like, the wear pattern on the base of this cup is an algorithmic process, because the way you hold it, so it's not random.
Yes,
it's not random marks. It's always constrained. It's always a flat surface on here, and it's usually marks like this because that's how you pick it up. And it's the same with anything, even something that's tumbled in the sea. It's very constrained, the types of action that happen on those surfaces, and so that's an algorithmic process. So when we start to, sometimes I'll make some of these textures and not trying to emulate anything in particular, like the main sort of, there's layers of textures in these works, but some of the textures I'm just thinking, just thinking about it purely as an algorithm, not knowing how it's going to come out, and I make it, and when I see it for the first time, it's like, oh, well, that kind of looks a little bit like Canvas.
Yeah.
And the fact that I like it, I think there's the fact that we like Canvas, the fact that we've used Canvas for so many centuries is not because there was no alternatives. There was lots of other types of textures you could have worked towards, right? I mean, they didn't use Canvas in Japan, for instance. They used like beautiful paper textures and stuff, but there's certain textures that we keep using throughout history because we like them, not because that's the only thing. And it's the same, so some of the textures we evolve in Gen art will overlap and become like those textures just because they're fundamentally good at what they do, and they're warm, they make us kind of feel good inside, and they also help to kind of like unify the surface and sort of help with transitions. If I removed like the texture layers, there's like 5 layers on these.
Yeah.
If I remove them, they just kind of look a little bit cold. They look. And there would have been a point where I said, yeah, that's how it should be. But now I was like, I can't live without it. No, the text, yes, it's skeuomorphic. There's no doubt about it. I actually modeled it on my own handwriting.
Yeah.
mainly because I had my hand there and I could draw a letter a few times and see how I drew it, and I thought, well, that should be mine because I'm the artist, right? So yeah, but other than that, maybe you could say the floor plane is in a sense kind of skeuomorphic, to try to model some perspective, But I like the spectrum, that some elements are clearly skeuomorphic, some are somewhere in between, some are clearly not. Everything I do in my work, I'm always trying to create, if I have something, I try to find lots of ways to vary that thing.
Yeah.
And it creates a richness and a kind of like an intrigue, You just don't want the same thing appearing over and over again.
Yeah, it's just, I think, yeah, and I think the thing is too is that while you were talking, the piece that came up to mind is actually Tyler Hobbs' wall, which he did with proof. I don't know if you've seen that piece,
Yeah.
but that's another, and I wasn't thinking about that before, but of that debate, it is an interesting piece in that regard too, of like, what he did with that piece of, trying to algorithmically recreate a specific wall, a photograph of a wall, right? And like you were saying when you were talking about that, I think that's true. I think that about, how everything has an algorithmic process at the core, right? And things in nature, etc., right? So, taking the challenge up to emulate a lot of those is really cool. I don't think it's looking back. I think it's actually it is a way of going forward, right? It just may not be the way that some digital artists choose to. So I think it's and also I think the other thing is too is that it a lot of the skeuomorphic art, this type of textures and these things, they build a bridge for maybe more traditional art collectors to come into digital art, right? And it's not such a a big leap for them to start looking at some of this other stuff as art. So it's like the same thing with, and that will build a bridge to something else, right? Like, like if I showed my dad your work, in this, he would say, "Oh, this is great. This is he would really enjoy it." However, if I go and show him, X copy, for example, like he is like, what is this? Like he is like, no. He's like,
Right.
He's just like complete, like, no. So it's interesting of how, these type, we need art that is a bridge as well between different movements.
We do. We're all talking about how do we get more entrance, right? But if ultimately, if the work it doesn't resonate with people outside of the space, then nobody's going to.
Yeah,
it's just a real tall ask to try and teach people the culture here and everything.
Exactly.
But just circling back to what we just talked about, I would also say, like, looking back in art is not a problem. It's if you look at the history of art, Picasso looked to like primitive African face masks and stuff. Art's always looking back, and Picasso used to paint pictures after Velasquez and stuff like that. It's always like that's where the juice is for me, is going back to the past and saying, okay, how do I reinterpret this with this new medium?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like a recycling machine. It's always doing this. It's not like it's almost like the future is just this empty thing, It's like it has to pull in something from the past to, like you say, enable people to connect with it, but also just because why not? It's like science abandoning everything that went before, didn't start from scratch each time, right? You wouldn't do that.
It's the same reason why when you look at, if you analyze so many screenwriting and stories and movies, it's like the same story over and over again, right? Like it's because it deeply resonates with these stories, deeply resonate with us at a core level. So that's why you don't just completely come up, even if you with a brand new narrative that's like that has no narrative structure, right?
Right.
That would be people would rebel against it probably. I mean, most people. So it's, you kind of follow structures that have been in the past, and then you put your own spin on them. I think that's what really great art does is kind of take something from the past and something that maybe people are familiar with, and then is able to put a very bold, new direction on it, or some, something that makes it unique, and places it in its time.
Yeah, it makes it quite different from technology in that sense. I mean, technology does sometimes kind of like go back to the past, but usually it's very forward-looking. Art is much more, and because our space is so maybe technology focused, that's something that maybe I wouldn't say confuses things, but it gives us a different spin on what our value system for art may be. Why we would have maybe a problem with somebody who's looking too far into the past, because it's so forward focused, But there's a danger in. I always feel like there's a danger in being too too focused on like the cutting edge of technology, because technology just comes and goes, and we don't care about technology from the 90s, for instance, right? Who cares about Betamax, So, if you're always, as an artist, if you're always trying to be on that cutting edge of technology, you could, you could miss the real juice of art, right? You could, and so there may be like merit in using sort of like somewhat obsolete technology. And I think, JavaScript it's not obsolete by any means, but it's solid and it's not cutting edge in any way, like the things I try to stick to are things that have been around for a long time in tech, 20 years or so, and evolved and mature. And so because I don't want to get lost in the new thing, and then actually the new thing is not that interesting in 5 years time.
Well, that's something that I think you, on the technical level, those people that care about that, I think it is very interesting, like your use of SVG. I think I don't think most artists use SVG. I don't. And having discussion with you of your, you use it, I think, in every single project you use it on, right?
Apart from Photon's Dream.
Yep. But maybe talk about that. Why did you choose SVG? Like, I think, and, this project obviously uses it as well. And it's just JavaScript, manipulating and creating SVG. I think it's an interesting approach, and one you've stuck with.
I mean, I've just used it for a long time, so I'm very familiar with it. And I've been using it right from the beginning when it was first around. Actually, I mean, like, I've never actually approached the SVG Foundation and said, "Look what I do with SVG," because possibly nobody does anything like, SVG was never designed to do what I do with it. They may not believe that it is SVG because, but I think it's a demonstration of the power of what it can do, because these things render quickly and they have a lot of, elements to them.
I know, it's amazing, like how
you've picked one now that renders slowly, but
yeah, exactly.
Some of them,
Well, that one
these ones with all the some of these have got hundreds of thousands of elements in, but I like it because it's quick for the most part. I'm impatient. I want the way the way I work. I like to render images live on my screen as I'm working, so I don't want to be waiting for 5 minutes in between each one. So for people, and it's quick because SVG is really well optimized by like Chrome browsers and stuff, and it takes everything down at a low level and it works everything out. So it doesn't have to go through every pixel every time.
Yeah.
So it's super optimized. But it's also like, you can make it as large as you want in theory. I mean, there are limits, like I find like around 17,000 pixels.
Yeah.
It gets tricky, right? But the idea that every part of the artwork is actually, for people who don't know, is like an equation basically, rather than a set of pixels. So you can zoom into these things indefinitely and see all the kind of
and the thing is too is that it's like one of the things about it that's interesting is like, everything that's on the Artblocks platform is kind of vector by default, by just the fact that it has to be kind of resolution agnostic, and on the JavaScript in the code layer, it has to, if you refresh the page or whatever, render at that screen size. But yours has additional, I guess you would call it feature, is that by doing it in SVG, you could download the SVG, and it's now vector on, your computer or on wherever you're taking it, so it's kind of like portable, in vector form. Yeah.
Yeah, you could download it. I've actually find like if you download the SVG and try to open it up in Illustrator stuff, it'll crash Illustrator because like there's no way like vector graphics is usually used
in this way. Yeah, it's not designed for this, but
so actually if you click my outputs, you can download them in high res all the way down to like, I think, 7,000 pixels where you start to get issues. So that will be a PNG. So
it's much more usable, which is great.
Yeah, because the downside SVG is you right click it and save it.
Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
You're not going to be able to save image. So on these, what I do is like 99% of it is SVG, and then I put an additional transparent canvas layer on top to get a certain sort of texture I can't get with, and it's like a certain sort of papery sort of weavy texture, and I do that as a canvas. So if you right click and save it, you'll get that, which is just this black texture. Yeah.
If anybody's interested, if you ever inspect these pieces, you'll see a lot of like most of Artblocks pieces, they'll just have a canvas element and people are drawing on the canvas. Yeah. But, with your pieces, because they're SVG, you actually can see all the
parts.
Yeah, exactly. All the paths and stuff like that. And are actually visible inside of the HTML like layer, the DOM.
Yeah. And that's really handy for like debugging as well. Like and I can give each part an IDs, which makes it. I don't always do that, but if I need to like find something that's going wrong and I want to isolate that part and see where it is in the DOM. Yeah.
That's really helpful. Like I think it's from an artist's perspective, when I think about it, like that is something I haven't thought about, but it is very hard to, if you're just drawing on the canvas, to really identify when something is going wrong, because it's you can't really visualize, it's just drawing the pixels on the canvas, right? So then at that point, then it stops becoming an object, right? It's kind of
This feels very mechanical, and I am just very mechanical by. I've always liked machines. I've always liked like working on my own cars and stuff like that, and building and making stuff with my hands. So it just feels like I can get like any element on the screen. I know exactly how that's constructed and made. There's no sort of like ambiguity about it. I don't use like SVG filters, which actually work on a bitmap level, probably because they're slow. And so I'm making things very sort of like the way I think about my construction, my work. It's very sort of I can draw it out on paper. That's how I often start, and to put it into an algorithmic form. It's like woodwork to me.
Yeah. I love this framing that you did, for, just to simulate it in a gallery space. That would be pretty amazing.
I'd love to make, the work that big. Typically, artists don't make big work like this unless they're super successful, because who would buy it? Nobody can put this stuff in a house, right? It has to go in a museum. So it means that you're already a museum level artist, right? And you need a huge space, So it's like usually it's a dream. I'd love to make work this big, but it's usually only something that happens for artists who are, showing internationally at a museum. Who big museums are buying our work, but you can still fake it like this.
Yeah, nothing's stopping you. I mean,
I could just pay. I could pay make these things. Do a pop-up exhibition somewhere in New York. But it's hard to do a pop-up, but you need a big space. If you cram all these things together, it doesn't look the same. You need big walls and stuff.
Yeah, so, and I mean the thing is that as you know, is that making it is one thing digitally, and then turning this into a physical piece and putting it, it's a whole nother thing, right?
It's a totally different thing.
Yeah, like it's not as simple as just printing it. You're gonna have to really think about, the choices of paper and inks and things like that. And do you want it to? That's another thing too. Is like, I guess there's another debate of should the goal be to completely emulate the digital output, or in as close as possible in the physical sense, or do you? Yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on that. Do you treat it as a separate work when you make it physical, or different? Maybe not separate work, but maybe a different permutation of a work when you make it physical. How do you look at that between the digital and a physical?
Well, at the moment, like, until I've got my new studio built, I'm building one next door. I'm just limiting myself to prints, because for me, if I'm gonna actually start doing physical work again, you can't just build an algorithm and say and just send it to some process. The process is part of how you make the art, and it's like a feedback loop. So any art that's made in this physical way has to like evolve over a long period of time, and you make iterations and get to know the medium so sort of deeply, and the medium and the art are one, really. It's the same thing. But print, print is, I still think, print technology is amazing. We sort of take it's just a print. Oh, what do you mean? I mean, print technology has come so far, and I personally love my stuff in just, with a really good quality print on beautiful paper. I think it's still the best way to view it, although I still love the idea that, crikey, I can just make digital things. I've been trying to find a market, a way to sell digital things for 25 years. So finally it's here. I'm not about to necessarily go back and doing everything physical. I'm just enjoying long form generative code-based art in a digital form, and that's always going to be, I think, my base for the foreseeable future. But yeah, you're right. When I print, obviously it's a different version. I'm not trying to replicate necessarily what's on my screen, but then what's on your screen is going to be different on a different screen. Exactly. So it's like there's no absolute in this. As long as what I see on the printed page pleases me, and usually, to be honest, I send the same file more or less to my printer, and I've never been disappointed. I've always been like, shit, there's colors you can get in print now which you can't get on your screen. This is the thing that people don't realize. The color gamut on a good printer is vast.
Yes.
So I've never been disappointed so far. I've never had to send a print back and say, look, can we tweak the colors here?
I know it's amazing, and I look at it and like I've really thought about this a lot, and my thinking has evolved on it for sure. I really think of prints. I think what in the end, like when we're doing these long form generative art where the code is on chain, which I think is in this space, I just think it's the best version of it, right? Like it's very pure, and it also is I think of it like, and I've gotten into photography the last couple of years a lot, and I love it, especially film photography. And, I just think of this analogy of a negative, right, in the film world of that you can kind of use this negative, it's archival, and then you can make prints and all these things out of it. And I really think there is a great analogy between that and like the output on the code that's stored on the chain, and also then that hash that makes that particular output, right? And then of course, there's also print permutations that can be made off that. There is, anytime it's rendered on a screen, right? That's a print of that particular the code being run, and it producing an output with the using that hash. But then it's also going through someone's computer, that operating system, and then eventually into the pixels on their screen, and they're through the air, and then they're viewing it. And right, that's going to be different for everybody. It's never going to be exactly the same. Even just the if you want to get even more, it's the same way with regular art too, right? The lighting completely changes of a room, changes the way an art piece looks, right? Or
Right.
and I'm sure we have even personally have slight variations, even if you're not colorblind, the in how we perceive color and things like that. So I think it's interesting at least framing it has been helpful for me, like that of saying, okay, that like what we're really building and what the art is almost this is the code on the is the instruction set, right? And then combined with this hash, and then that downstream it kind of has these expressions, almost, if you want to call them that, of different ways that this is viewed or printed, right?
Yeah, I think of it in a similar way. I think of like music scores, like we have Beethoven's Fifth Symphony.
Yeah.
And it's like it has to be reinterpreted each time for it to live. And there'll be ways to render this work, all of our works in the future, which we can't imagine today. And there'll be elements of interpretation and how they're produced, and you'll maybe in the future, you'll get like generative art performers, people like a pianist, right? Somebody who's an expert in kind of like a virtuoso in interpreting these pieces and bringing them into these new ways of experiencing them. So you're right, they're not, they're this kind of like a blueprint or a score, and they're going to continue to live. You want them to, you want people to breathe new life into them in the future.
Yeah, that's why it's it's really like you could, represent them good or represent them not the best, right? Like same thing with the score, right?
Right.
You could take that score and you can make really great music with it, or you could do a bad rendition of it, right? That's not faithful to the artist's vision, or and doesn't communicate what the the artist was communicating, or doesn't hit that emotional level that the original permutation did. So I think that's really interesting, and I think at least when I think about that, I think when we talk about, because I think that's one thing that I think we've done pretty weak in this I would say crypto art space so far, which is moving beyond the digital world, just like of us seeing it on our phones or on screens and things like that, and how do you make an actual gallery or an exhibition, or how do you display it in your home, these type of things. I think there's been definitely people that have done it well, but I'm saying, like, on average I've seen a lot of examples of things not really thought out well, right? And I think there's a desire for people to, people do have the desire to do that better as the technology of screens gets better, and printing and all these type of things. But yeah, it's interesting space for sure.
Yeah, we have an opportunity to kind of really reimagine the way things, way exhibitions, physical exhibitions, the way art's created, the way we can do all kinds of new things. I mean, there's in an attempt to bridge and try to get some kind of deeper connections to the contemporary art world, we end up doing things that look more like contemporary art. We get white galleries and sell things, and in a similar way, we start to lose the transparency of sales and things like that, and focus on But I think there's we do have some, like, we don't all have to go down that route. I think maybe a year ago I thought maybe that's the right way to do it, to try and look more like something that is more easily digested by the contemporary art world. But now I'm actually gone back to my original kind of core things that excite me. Just trying to do the things that really excite me and forget about trying to model it to any particular, try to make it fit somewhere. I just want to do the things I love, and fuck it. I mean, as long as I'm selling, and that's what I'll continue to do. You know, I mean, it's a privileged position. You know, not. I mean, I do know what it's like not to have that privileged position, obviously, because.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll keep. So you know, if I have exhibitions in the future, I'd be thinking, well, I'd be trying to start from zero, from scratch again, and think, how can we make an experience here that doesn't necessarily look anything like you would find in the contemporary art world.
I agree, and I think my thinking has, I guess, evolved as well on that, yeah, I think we got to lean into what we have in that sense. I think emulating, you know, a traditional art space or a contemporary art space and trying to just fit in with that exact, like, I think there's a difference between, like, you know, we can build a bridge like we were talking about earlier, but building a bridge doesn't mean you have to be exactly the same, right?
Right.
We could touch that and have elements of that, but we also can show how we're different, right?
Right.
And the you know, evolution of kind of that medium, right? So yeah, I think that would be really cool, because I think, like you said, like, it's like it does matter that it's code generated. Like, some people say, you know, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just about the aesthetics of it, and the fact that it's generated in code shouldn't matter at all. And I think there is something to be said that it's generated with code, right? And I think that matters to people when you tell them. It's
part of the story, it's part of the practice. But also it enables you. I think that the obvious thing that, like, we tend to overlook is the fact that every artwork is unique, that we're creating these machines that can create an infinite amount of art, right? And what does that mean? That mean, like, in reality, that means that the average art collector who finds this work can generate a piece and own a unique, you know, an out of bounds, not necessarily an NFT, but they could, like, they can create find an output they love, and they can maybe have it printed, have it signed by the artist, and for maybe for $50, I don't know, for $100, for $20, and that's mind blowing for because that's not possible in the traditional art world. I really feel like that, you know, if I do an exhibition this year or whatever next year in, say, New York City or something, I would love to have, you know, a couple of screens and a big generate button, not a laptop or anything, just a generate and a save button maybe, so people can go in there and generate and get that, feel the magic of generating something they love. Maybe they can enter their name or something to see what happens when that's the seed, right?
Yeah.
And save a few, find one they love, have it printed there.
Exactly. That would be really.
I can sign it. Boom. And
if you could have it where, you know, you people are just hitting generate, they find one, or they type in something meaningful to them or something like that, it feeds into and then, like, okay, they're like, you know, all right, print, and it comes and prints out, right? And then you know, they could take that home or something like that, even if it's not an NFT, or maybe there's some way to, you know, print the seed phrase on it, or in some secure way that they, you know, can then go enter that in, you know, in MetaMask or something and claim it later. That would be pretty interesting. But you know, there's a couple different. I think just the element. I think we have. I think there's been a lot of on the. I'll call it the. I don't want to say fine art, but, like, on the high end things of this. You know, like, there's been a lot of success on collections. You know, call it, you know, up to 1,000 outputs, right? And, you know, obviously, you know, 10,000 with, you know, CryptoPunks and Squiggles and things like that. But I do think that there's this unlocked potential with generative art that is, you know, millions of outputs, right? Like, because it really could enable that. And I think I always, just since the beginning of when I discovered art blocks, and what's always gotten me really excited is just that, like, and I think we've talked about it probably before. I talk about it all the time, but I know I've talked to Snowfro about this, and he has similar visions about it. I think that he's trying to at least start that with generative goods, but it's this whole thing of you know, you walk into these you know, like any of these home goods or IKEA like stores, and you go to the art section there, and you know there's like millions of maybe copies of this, or at least hundreds of thousands of a particular piece in there, and they're kind of mass manufactured, and people just buy them and put them in their houses. And like that's what most people when they have art in their home in the US, they don't have unique pieces. They have, they go to one of those stores and they just like pick out stuff that they like and they put it up, which is fine. But I just think generative art can unlock this, which I think they haven't been able to do in the past, of been able to like make 100,000 unique outputs and like have them in a store, right? And then like you pick one out, you buy it, and that that's a unique piece by a skilled artist, and just the economies of scale of generative art and digital art and the ability to print and stuff like could make that happen and do that at a quite affordable price point, right? So I think like that long tail, I'll call it, hasn't been realized yet. And I think like it's a combination of like, people have to, I think, understand it. I think, the technology still has to be more accessible, and also probably the printing technology isn't set up to do, unique prints like that, for that scale maybe. But I think these will be overcome eventually, and I think like it's going to be pretty cool when it happens.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if I didn't just love making art all the time, then I've seriously considered trying to like create a startup to do this very thing. All these collections we have, they could still, they can still all generate an infinite number of out of bounds, pieces, and it's only going to help create, build the provenance for the NFT collection.
Yeah.
If there's a million people out there in the world that the Mona Lisa is the Mona Lisa because it's everywhere in the world, on tea towels, on postcards, whatever. It's a no-brainer. I still feel like I'm amazed that nobody's really. Well, maybe some people are pursuing this idea, but it has to be done right. The branding has to be right.
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean,
it's not easy.
No. Yeah, no, it's not an easy problem. That's the problem.
No, it's true.
I think the manufacturing and the supply chain is the hardest part. Obviously, it's not necessarily the, and also the relationships. You got to sell a company like Home Goods or IKEA and something like this on something like this, and like sell them on the fact that like no one's complained that there's a million of these, right? So they're not hearing complaints that they're not hearing an explicit ask from their customer base, I think, that are saying we want unique pieces inside of Home Goods. Most people probably just like they're not even thinking of that one, and like they don't think it's possible, for that price point, right? So it's interesting. Like I think it's definitely an idea, but it's also something that is like it's something new, and obviously that takes a lot of effort. It's also unproven too, which is so it's a risk that it's like, okay, you're doing all this extra effort. Are people really going to pay more, or they're going to care about this at all, right?
Right. Yeah. I think for me, the obvious thing to do is just to do my own tests, my own experiments in the world, and see if it works for me, and then maybe that becomes an inspiration or a model for something on a bigger scale.
I've thought of it's a way of there's a couple way of doing this. Like there's the pre-printing one where you have it, you could pre-print it. And have those in the store or whatever. But there's also a version of what like you were talking about before, where it's like they're able, like, what if there was a machine there that you could generate different outputs, right? And then you basically could hit a button, like you said, and you can generate, and then they have like frames there or something, and they come out, and you can just like put it in a frame and take it at that point. And it's like credit card or whatever.
The technology's there, right? I mean, it's not a technology problem. It's just
Yeah, it would definitely be like a hardware. You'd have to like do some hardware work, obviously, because you need to build a machine with like an integrated printer or something, or or it would have to be like a staffed desk or
Right.
something. Because I think like, I don't know if people would just want to do that online. I think they'd want to see it. So I think it would have to be like because it's just too foreign of a concept for people to, I think, go to a website online and generate it and then order it. I think some people would do that, but I think like to get the most value out of it, you would have to have like a machine in a mall or something like that, right? Where people can go and just start playing with it and then like see the outputs, and then it's like, oh, that's cool. Like, let's let's print this out, and they hit print and it comes out. Like that's like you were saying earlier. I think until people start to experiment and play in the space, you don't really understand it. You don't see the kind of value of it or get excited about it.
The culture is so foreign here to anybody outside,
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest problems and like one of the blocks of like that I think a lot of people don't realize is that it is so like I think it attracts a very certain type of person that's very tech savvy and very willing to learn, and has the skill to learn new technology and understand crypto and art and NFTs and MetaMask and seed phrases, like all these type of things. But the average person is not that person. And, there's a chasm between like kind of the people that are in this space and, what people like to call retail, we'll call them normies.
Right.
And like, I think the problem is that so many people in this space are just like naturally like, everybody else, that they just expect that. I don't think they realize how big of a gap there is there, that people aren't just gonna like be downloading MetaMask and installing this stuff like and expecting to take their own seed phrase and stuff. It doesn't matter how many tutorials you do, like they have no desire to do that in their lives. Like
Right.
so it's that's why I think like unless people do a very dedicated and do the hard work of making all this stuff very more accessible, and also not only just accessible from like a technology standpoint, but like visible in a physical space or in culture, like you're saying. I think it's gonna stay a small space.
Yeah, I mean, there's a possibility that the culture, certainly around like the more, I mean, I think already the space, right, is become big and sort of like there's subgenres within,
Yeah.
and there's groups which have different values, right? I mean, I feel like a lot of the values I have as an artist don't necessarily overlap into the more red chip side of things, right? And there's certain segments of Web3 which I think the culture has become more distilled and it's getting even increasingly more distilled.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more opaque.
Yeah.
And I think it's like I in my mind I have this vision of like how like in cosmology you get galaxies that are kind of accelerating away from each other to the point where they go beyond the speed. Space expands beyond the speed of light and they'll never be able to communicate. It's almost like the art world. We have this kind of like naive idea that somehow we have this idea of this big art world that's going to somehow recognize what we're doing and maybe either embrace it. But the art world is already incredibly fragmented into all these different pieces, and it's getting more like that. And we may find that Web3 is this like this bubble that continues to, and it still may well have value for the people who care about that culture and crypto and stuff, and those collectibles will still increase in value, but they may not ever be of interest to part of the contemporary art world, because even the contemporary art world is different parts that don't necessarily overlap.
That's why I just think too is like it's a silly thing anyways, because like I just see so much more potential with people that don't ever collect art or have never collected art than I do with people that collect contemporary art. I think there's just so much of an untapped market on that end, rather than trying to go after people that collect contemporary art. I think it's just so much more potential on the other end
Right.
of people that have never collected art, have no interest, have up to this point have no interest in it. Maybe they have an interest in art, but they thought that it was outside. They could never afford like a unique piece of art, or they thought it was pretentious, or they've been turned off by it. This type of thing, like that to me is much more exciting. This more democratizing art angle, rather than trying to win over some elites of that have are kind of the bastions of contemporary art collecting, right? Like,
and we live in an era where, like, if you think probably two of the most successful artists, like Banksy and Kors, maybe, in the last, to have appeared in the last 20 years, they just done their own thing. They haven't tried to
exactly
fit their work into a certain canon or an institute. They just done their own
Banksy
thing.
wasn't like he was turned down like so much. Like they kind of like the contemporary art world was like the street artists. Like they were, it wasn't until the celebrities started buying his work that it like got, they were the ones who really like, the traditional kind of gallerists and the people that are in the contemporary art where they kind of like stuck their nose up at it, and probably still do, but so it just shows you that, there's this, it's not a most powerful thing I think I've learned in my life. And just like, I learned it, thankfully it took me maybe till a little after college to learn it, but you grow up, and I don't know how your family was, but it's like you're kind of told what to do, and it's like very black and white of like, this is the way it is, and like you're gonna do this, like this is like a plan, of like, and this is how you do it. And just like think like in college, and then shortly after I kind of realized, wait a second, like, no, this is just not real. Like these narratives like are not, it's like you can play, and like it's a whole system that has all these different ways of expression, and you can do things, and they have different results, and it's you're not on a conveyor belt, you're actually swimming.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Life is play to some extent. We're here to have fun to some extent. It always kind of irks me a little bit if I hear a collector or someone on X say, sort of like give advice to an artist and say, look what this artist is doing, you should pay attention.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, no, they shouldn't. They should just really focus on what they care about and do what they care about.
Yes.
Because it's the worst. It creates pain for the artist to look at other people and compare themselves and think, well, should I be doing this? You have to find what works for you.
Yeah.
And it's the only way to ever have a legacy is to do your own thing. You can't be
exactly. And the thing is too is like and I say that with collecting art too. Like, who cares? Like you gotta buy things that you like, and you love, and whatever the value is. And even things that I've collected and gone up in value kind of as a collector, like, it's always the ones that like I just loved, and like it resonated with me, and I didn't care about what the market was saying at that point or what it was hyping up or anything like that. I was like, oh no, I think this is like undervalued because I really like this, and I think over time, that feeling, you're probably going to be right following that feeling actually for yourself, because like you don't care, you're not going to just sell it like prematurely either, because you really love it, and you're like, even if it goes to zero, I still like love this piece. I think and even making art is the same thing of like, I think learning that, okay, no, the only really thing that matters is if I like it, right? As an artist, and if I'm proud of it and I really love it, and okay, then I'm gonna put it out there, and if people love it, okay, but I've already won because I've made something that I really enjoy, and I feel like is I made something that I wanted to put into the world, right? So
right, yeah, that's what we aim for. It is like I will say, I will caveat that by saying it's always what I'm trying to do, but I would say it like requires like a huge amount of kind of like confidence and self-belief to not get kind of like pressured into like following certain trends or
definitely.
it's
It's
one
not
of the
easy to do that.
hardest things as an artist, I think, to like stick to your guns.
Yeah,
And
especially if you are under financial pressure, right? Like
right,
if you're in a
yeah,
position where you are doing art for a living and you have to make money, that is a different situation to be in, and it's extremely hard in that sense if you're in that position to
right.
just do what you love, right? Because when you're seeing what's selling, right? And if and you're always going to be, and maybe that's what you have to do in that situation, in that
It's a tough,
phase of
it's a
life. I don't
middle
know.
ground, right? It's the arts, like I worked for, for most of my life without any audience, without selling anything, and I always just got to do what I wanted, And there's certain merits in like, I made a conscious decision to just give up trying to sell it and just do what I loved.
Yeah.
And then if you then becomes a livelihood,
Yes.
where you really you're not making enough to be able to just do, that's you're under huge pressure to kind of like, if you produce stuff that sells and you're going to be under pressure to keep producing that particular thing.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm fortunate enough that I'm good for the next 10 years. I can kind of like do whatever I want. I mean, I was just lucky I got into art blocks early enough that I can just, but it's a rare, it's like crazy. I think about it every day, like how, as an artist, I have a lot of artist friends because, like, who aren't in Web3, and they're like, fuck, their life is hard. And it's things like same for actors and stuff. Most 99% of artists are just, they're living at poverty. They don't, if they sell something for a few $100, they're over the moon, and they're barely scraping by. And somehow I went from one extreme and bypassed the middle ground. But I know I'm really lucky, because it's a tiny, tiny fraction of the art creative. And there's a lot of really amazingly creative people out there who just don't have that good luck, So
yeah, that's the thing. I think people, with everything, I've talked about this, I think before, definitely is and that's something that it's taken me a while. I think about everything. It's just that I think we have this romantic notion of, that the best products, artists, all these things should win and should be the most successful and should be in a market sense, right? But I've realized that that's like not the case, and that's not reality. I think of even in the history of art, right? Like I think of Vincent van Gogh a lot. Is probably the one I think of, is that he didn't sell anything in his life, very little. And then after he dies, his kind of sister-in-law inherits his work, and then just happens to kind of have these relationships with gallerists in Paris, and through that relationship is able to get his work into Paris and starting to get basically pumping it, as we would like to say, to the the rich people in Paris. And then it kind of, starts to get Vincent up on everybody's radar, and they want Vincent's work. And then, it just elevated him up, and he's an incredibly talented artist. I'm not going to say and take anything away from him on that point of view. But I'm saying that, if his sister-in-law doesn't make the introduction or doesn't, do that work behind the scenes of getting his work into Paris and in front of the right people and the right gallerists, would we be talking about him today? No, we wouldn't be. So it's like, it's, and there probably are a lot of people like around contemporaries that were in a similar situation that have beautiful work but it's just like we don't know anything about it because it didn't get at the right time in the right place and to the right people, and didn't get elevated in the culture, and and it's a little something distressing about that, because like we want it to be the romantic and that, you know, but that's the reality of things, right? There's this element of luck and this element of these market forces that determine, at least on the market side, what's going to sell, at least for the most, and what's going to be the most financially and most, I guess, well-known artists, right? And I don't associate with that with quality. I think, like, you know, the market is different than, you know, the quality is subjective, you know, to whoever views it and what value they get out of the art piece, right? That doesn't necessarily equate to market value, right?
No, it never has done, not really. Yeah, you think, like, I mean, Rembrandt died poor, you know. I mean, he there's a good example. Like, he actually had quite a bit of success in his earlier life. I mean, he was just clearly a phenomenal talent. But as he evolved his work and he wanted, you know, as he was following his heart, he, you know, it seems simplistic today, but like some of these people who commissioned his work didn't like the result because he would put these kind of very sort of like bold shadows, and they'd feel like, well, I'm only getting half a face. Where's the other half of my face? I'm not paying for this. And because he was following his artistic heart, let's say, and making this sort of dynamic, incredible work that was really cutting edge for the time, he took the cost was that he fell out of favor. He was unfashionable, you know. Bach was J.S. Bach. I mean, he's not an artist, but he was a composer, right? He was just a family guy. He had like 11 kids. He was never wealthy. His kids, ironically, were more famous than him because his kids were composers, and he was never trendy, you know. He was kind of flown, you know. He was just writing scores for the local cathedral, whatever. I don't think it's the case for every art. Obviously, like Picasso was famous for it his whole life, apart from when he had a little underground period when he was creating cubism and stuff. But there are definitely, for sure, there's people who have flown under the radar and been forgotten. Their work perishes. You know, if we don't value it, it soon deteriorates. It soon rots. Yeah, you know, if Pollock, you know, wasn't like, if he didn't capture the imagination of his time for whatever reason, his work would all be powder by now because he used emulsion and all kinds of crap, bitumen, and, you know, we preserve the stuff we care about, but everything else kind of like rots.
Well, that's one thing about our medium that is a benefit, is that, you know, we could be long gone and someone, you know, in Ethereum blockchain is still up there, and
hopefully,
hopefully, we can't guarantee that, but, you know, that data is somewhere out there, and someone's digging around doing some blockchain archaeology and discovers some amazing work by somebody, you know, in 500 years, and is able to get a computer from this time and render it and play with it, and that'd be pretty interesting.
I know there's some voices that kind of question the idea that it's immutable and what have you, but I think it's just good practice. If you've got it there, why? It's another form of archiving, right? It's a very robust archive in principle. Why not use it? You can do other things as well. Back the work up, you know. You could even print the code and put it in a safety deposit box or something. I don't know. Or just, you know, there's other things you could do potentially, but
and I even think, like, when you do, I've been thinking more and more about it, like when you're on L2s or anything like that, you know, like maybe we should be, I don't know if you do this, but I was thinking, like, maybe I should be putting at least the source code on L1 or something, just for that.
No, I thought about that. Maybe putting some stuff, actually maybe inscribing some stuff on ordinals as well. This is like this, you know, extra chain backup. You know, I wouldn't sell it there. I just inscribe it there. It's fairly easy to do. It's a bit expensive, but it's not really for code-based work. So, you know, why not? Yeah,
I think that's just like something to think about, because layer twos, I'm, you know, I don't know. I think a lot of them are not yet completely. You know, they're not sending all their stuff back to the chain, obviously. So. Back to the L1, so I don't know the permanence of those. It would
be too expensive.
Yeah, but I think like L1 now with stable coins and that getting more adoption and stuff, like, I think, you know, it just gives me more hope that, you know, Ethereum at least the layer one will be preserved for a good amount of time, it seems, because if stable coins gain adoption, USDC and things like that, and they're used more and more, especially by banks and things like that, there's just so much more incentive to keep that network alive and healthy, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I guess on that note, we should talk about Studio.
Yeah, definitely. We should.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so one thing, yeah, we definitely should talk about Art Studio. I think like you had a post a little while ago, I want to say a couple weeks ago or something, and Eric Snowfro, retweeted it about it, and you, I guess you kind of posted that, I guess you said that you think that, and I don't want to paraphrase, you can obviously tell me if I'm wrong, but that you think Art is really doing the right thing with this whole preservation aspect of this. Maybe you want to expand on it of what you meant by that. Right.
Well, maybe if I just go back and talk about my last 3 months, I have had some work, and I've been trying to, I've been just reaching out to all the different partners in the space, all the different release partners I could work with, and talk to them about my work. And the general kind of feeling around Gen Art was a little bit, people just seem scared of selling that. They're like, oh no, we can't sell Gen Art's dead. Well, but not like that, but there was no real, and I just felt like nobody's really committing to Gen Art in the way that I'm committed to it, code base. Nobody really believes in it. But then I slowly realized that, okay, Artblocks still is, Eric's, they never did kind of get tempted to maybe start showing AI work and stuff that wasn't Gen Art. They've stuck to their guns. They're stuck to the thing that I believe in. And I thought, why am I looking elsewhere? Why don't I just go back to my home, and release on Studio? And because they were putting time, energy, money into building this infrastructure that added provenance to the collections they've already put on there, building a kind of technical infrastructure to make it easy to put stuff on there. And they look they look like they're committed for the long haul, and obviously they're in a privileged position. They've got money in the bank. They can do that, if they had to keep selling, like a verse or something, then maybe they would have to do something different. But the fact is they can kind of, they can really dedicate time, energy, and resources to the next chapter in Gen Art. I just thought, well, why did I even not just drop it on Studio to begin with? And I would say it's because I think it's because lots of other artists weren't embracing it. What you might call top tier artists weren't doing anything on there, and it just didn't have the right feel. Maybe when I first heard about Studio, I loved the idea. I loved the idea in principle that I could have my studio and release work whenever I wanted, and I wanted it to feel like my studio where I could invite collectors in. So it was not really like the studio full of artists, but it was like, if you imagine the structure, we got all these artists and they've got their own studios. That felt great, but it didn't quite feel like that initially. But I feel like hopefully that's the way it's going to go. I feel Studio can become this really awesome, exciting place, for the next chapter in Gen Art.
Yeah,
I think, and it's built on this solid base, which nobody else is providing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good analogy. I think I didn't really like you saying that. I definitely, the name of a studio name is actually very fitting, and it's almost like, especially with Art wrapping up with this, at least the curated side and things like that, with this, AB 500, kind of celebration and capstone. I think it's interesting of Art kind of transitioning into more of this kind of, I almost think of it like a building, really, when you think of it like that houses a lot of different artist studios, right? That are, but or have some sort of vetting and things like that, but are able to, help the artist kind of release their work and create a shared space and a shared community for artists to release work into that is algorithmic and is
Yeah.
on this robust platform.
Yeah, and it's not open, right? I mean, the artists who are on there are Art Blocks artists, and I think a few others who are reach a certain quality threshold, but it's just not a free for all by any means. This is the way I think about it. It's a curated set of artists rather than a curated set of collections. It's just which is like just how art galleries work, right? I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
They represent their artists and they allow the artists to do what they want, and so it's just a more like
It's like a new gallery model almost.
Yeah. And I will be trying to champion it as much as possible, and like encourage my arts friends to release there. But I do feel like I know other arts friends of mine who are really talented, and they're kind of feeling a little bit, oh, what do I do with my project? I don't really know. When you sell it on a platform that also sells one-on-ones and stuff, it gets compared, and you get pressured into doing these low supply projects, and it's not necessarily what's true to the medium that we're making. So I think just having Art Blocks, which is dedicated to our medium, what we do, and I think it's got an incredibly bright future.
Yeah. I'm probably going to get back to doing some art this fall. I'm excited about that. I have a backlog of ideas and things like that. So, I already have my contract up there in studio, and definitely plan to release on there when I do.
Yeah.
I think, it's great that Snowfur just had his drop, and that was, I think, a studio drop, or was with
his was an engine,
but it was with engine.
So our box focused on the engine and studio, so it's it does. He did his with was it Glitch?
Yeah, they did it with
under
Glitch.
The studio contract, but the studio is kind of more flexible. The engine's more of a flexible kind of. I might get an engine contract.
You have an engine. I do too as well. I did Marfa Mill somewhere on there, and with my brother, and I liked how they had like with that project, I did a flex project. I think Lift is actually a flex project as well that Snowfur just did, because sometimes you want to do things that are just not, you can't do it completely on chain. Like, I think a lot of my projects I will do completely on chain, but something like that where I collaborate with my brother and we did the photography, right? And it was photography mixed with gen art, film photography scanned in. You can't do that project all on chain. Like, it's not possible. So, the gen art and stuff was on chain, but then I'm also bringing in his photos from IPFS, into it, and having a flex contract allows for that, right? I think it's like, but I do think it's important to kind of call that out and say, like, okay, this is a flex project versus a purely on-chain project. I think the technology, like, I know some people are just like, and I think we talked about this earlier, of like, it's just, only the output, a look of the output matters. It shouldn't matter if it's, all on chain or, or if, it's flex. Right. But I just disagree with that. I think the medium matters. I think, there's a reason why when they display any art, they don't just display the art in the description. It tells you the medium of how it was detailed, about kind of how it was made, or at least, okay, it's oil on canvas, like, there's a reason they're putting that, because the medium does matter, right? I think it's important. I guess I disagree with the thought that it's just aesthetics, and that and that we don't have to talk about these things underneath.
Yeah, I mean, art is huge, right? It's vast. I mean, it's aesthetics, well, visual power, expression, it's concept, practice. There's all these things, the story of the artist, everything goes together in this big soup of what makes art interesting, or at least what captivates people's imagination, so one thing, so we talked about studio. I think that's amazing. I'm definitely planning on releasing there as well. I think I'm excited to see what Art Blocks does beyond the fall in Capstone on the 500. I think it's really amazing that I think it's a great idea that they kind of putting these 500 projects together and cementing it as kind of an era in generative art. And I think that's
gonna be pretty cool. I'd be curious, like, it'd be really cool to do like an exhibition or something with like, or you know, some sort of being able to visualize all 500, and you know, in some way. That would be really cool.
I'm sure it's, you know, it'll come at some point.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure many times, maybe for the next 50 years. Who knows?
Yeah. It would be a really cool thing to see if, you know, even just, and I'm sure people are just going to do it digitally as well. Like, you know, I've been messing with, I think I sent it to you, like an open source gallery thing, you know, and you gave me some good tips on it. But, you know, just like those type of experiences of okay, could you click an AB 500 tab, and then you can kind of show that in your home or something like that, or have that being, you know, be playing or something like that, like even in a digital sense instead of like a, you know, a physical thing. But I think both would be great. It'd be really cool.
Right. Yeah, I think it's great just looking at the sales feed at the moment, because it's not necessarily just full of fidenzas and ringers. You know,
yeah,
it's a lot of the old, you know, the kind of projects that have been forgotten because
I know
people want them to.
That's the thing. Like, there's some really and I talked to this, I think, when I was talking with on my podcast when I had Gen Artworks on, and we talked about kind of the original days of art blocks, and I thought that it was really interesting where before Fidenza, right? Because I think things really changed as soon as Fidenza came out in June of that year. But some of the projects before then, especially the factory projects, are really like, no one really talks about them anymore. Like, but I thought they were like really cool in their own way. Like, they weren't very, some of them weren't very, you know, they were maybe glitchy or you know, digital. Like, I think of the one that when I first went to Art Blocks, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, was it Galaxis, the one that's the globe? And it's, I don't know if you've seen that one, but it's you know, it's like a 3D globe that spins around, and a plane actually flies around the globe in some of them. Right. And I'll show it to you. Hold on, let me get it up. It was, I will always remember it because it's just one of those. I remember when I went to the Art Block site, I was just like, you know, the old version that was like Twitter Bootstrap. I was always like, oh, I don't know why, but I just thought this project was cool. And let me see if it's here. Here it is. And like, yeah, it was just like when it came up, I was just like, I don't know. It's just something that was very different. You know, you actually can control it, and like this one has the plane. And one thing is you can hit. I think it. Let's see if I can remember the key binding. I don't know if it'll work in like this version of Live View, but there's actually like a key binding that puts you in the plane. I thought it was Y, but let me see. If I just mash my keyboard, I bet you I can find it. There it is. It's P. So P puts you in the plane.
That's nice.
And you could like just fly around this and some of them have a helicopter.
Right.
So, you know, it's not a fine art, like, you know, it doesn't have that aesthetic to it. It's very like almost game like of a feel to it. But I love it. Like, I just think it just was when I went there, and I was like, oh, I can mint this my own world, you know, like, and you know, that seems like really cool. Like, they all have, so they all have a plane, but then some of them have this helicopter, as you can see. This one has the helicopter there flying over it. But this was one of the first projects when I went there that was, you know, there, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, and I think this is like one of them, you know, and I like how they're adding this AB 500 logo on it. But it's one that like I remember, and I think most people have forgotten about this project. But it was something that was one of the early factory projects that I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And it was also like one of the ones that was open, because the Curated at that time, I think, were selling out. not as fast, but like the factory projects, some of them were like left open and like you could actually mint. So I think I minted this one.
Right.
And it was, you know, it was something you could actually mint. Cool. So yeah, it was March 22nd, 2021. So I don't know. It's just like I'm looking forward to some of those projects that maybe, you know, were forgotten or something to be brought back. Another one maybe is what's another one that's like, well, like I don't know if you remember Cyber Cities.
Oh, was it by
PXLQ?
I'm thinking of Fernandez's project.
Yeah, no, this one. The problem with this, and this is something that I feel like is gonna be a problem, is I feel like this is broken. Like I feel like this project is broken, which is unfortunate because before this was some of these were animating.
Right.
So they were like ships almost that were coming across.
Is it in live view there?
Yeah, I think so. Or maybe not. Hold on. Maybe it was set to.
They might have set the default to render.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong in the. Yeah, maybe it wasn't live view, but yeah. Anyways, it's, you know, some of these. Oh, this actually is working. Okay, cool. I'm glad. It was just some of them, I guess, don't move, but some of them do. And again, it's like a different aesthetic. I think, you know, I think just like anything, you know, there's trends in art blocks, in gen art, and other movements. And this was just like a different time, I think, where even the curated projects, if you look from this time, like, they don't have like people wouldn't make a curated project, I think, like in the same way, right? Like it's a different style than kind of art blocks evolved into, especially after Fidenza, when you know, skeuomorphic elements got brought in, right? I think at this point it was very pure digital, pure almost game-like, right? Like almost pixelated 8-bit type stuff in a way, which I thought was, but there's something to that, you know? So
yeah, it's like the 500 represents kind of like I would say an evolution, because there's no real evolution in art. Art doesn't get better, it just changes.
Yeah.
So yeah, and one thing you know, Eric said in his interview about the 500 is, you know, he talked about, you know, how, you know, we have collectibles and we have art, and I've always seen, you know, I've always felt like actually we need to make that distinction bigger, and you know, so we're not talking about art in the same context as we are talking about red chip art. But actually, then he said, well, what, you know, why can't we just have highly collectible art, which is what gen art kind of is, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought, actually, yeah, maybe I've been a bit extreme on my views, so maybe there's a middle ground there. And I think gen art's already proven itself to be highly collectible art, you know? There's things like traits and stuff like that. Which, again, I've gone through a period where I've kind of like thought, well, we should just get, you know, traits. It's just an artifact from the collectors, the more collectible side of things, but... and I kind of dismissed them for a while, but now I'm thinking, yeah, no, let's lean into them as part of the form. So,
if you had to say, I don't know, like this
I like this project.
I love this project. This is the most. If you had to give me, if I had to give one most underrated curated project, it would be this one. I love this project. I don't get why other people like why the floor is so low. I have no idea. I am just like.
I think it's because it is. It's almost like, looks like photography or something. It looks like, you know, cosmological photography. Is highly representational, but it's just, not only is it just remarkable technically, but it's just beautiful. You know, I think it's.
I know, I agree.
Such a well crafted. It ticks all the boxes for me. It's an exquisite project, and yeah, it never really got the attention it deserved when it minted.
Yeah, it just minted at kind of maybe a low time, but
I've been meaning to pick some up on the secondary.
Yeah, exactly. I think I
should
had
probably,
one or two.
I should probably just go get some before this.
Yeah, it's
Is this the same guy who did the
Rivers? Yeah,
the recent studio project?
I don't know. He definitely did. He's done 2 curated projects. He's done Rivers.
Oh, the Rivers. Oh, so that one was more
Ancient Courses of Fictional Rivers, and then he's done Latent Spirits. I think he did before that, and then his latest project was a Presents project.
No, that's not the one I was talking about.
Recollection.
Right.
Which is, I would love to have him on the podcast. I think just to talk about some of this stuff.
But that project.
I think this is just, especially when you get into the water ones, when it's over water and it has the reflections.
Right.
Like this is just, I don't know. Like I just think it's this one, and then I really like Memories of Digital Data. That one, especially when you see that, displayed on a nice screen, and it's animated. I think I saw it. Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
It was in the art blocks house, and it has a sound too. That has a wave sound that's generated. That if you turn it on,
right.
It's just, I like when they're animated and they feel very meditative and calm, and
right.
And this is one of them that like feels that way. Like you could live with it, right? It's not. That's the one. Like I love X copy and stuff, but like you're not really going to put X copy on your wall, right? And have it running 24/7 while your guests are over, right?
Not a dinner party.
Yeah.
3 people there. And
yeah, exactly. Like
you get your family over for dinner, maybe.
Yeah,
not.
people, trying to stay focused while this demon is being completely glitched out, like over and over again on the wall.
Yeah, this type of thing is kind of like why I feel like it's like a fireplace piece, right?
Yeah,
it's something that's provides this ambient background, which is always you can look at for a long time, and like in the same way a fire does that for people. It brings a focal point that everybody can still talk without. Television doesn't necessarily do that because you're talking, watching a film and nobody's talking. But I feel like these there's another thing that Gen Art will another whole market maybe where I feel like the people may rent these, they may rent certain works to have pieces to have, and maybe they rent a special one for a dinner party, from a Tyler Hobbs or something. But I haven't done a lot of motion art because
I know you haven't.
I actually generally I do like it. I mean, I've done some before I got into NFTs, but I actually, it's all, like a lot of my favorite art is just still, I like the absoluteness of it. I like the fact that it takes months to reveal itself, and you build a different relationship with something that doesn't change. And I probably will go back and explore at some point, especially with the stuff like around Photon's Dream, that type of way of making work. I would, maybe.
I don't even remember this project.
It was like waveforms, so these things can kind of like ripple and kind of morph together like water. So I would I've made some pieces I'm really fond of which animate with that type of approach.
Yeah. Photon's Dream, I remember Photon's Dream. I mean, I was one of the original minters of.
You did, you
me and Keith, we saw that project, and we were, I think we just, I was like, I knew the quality of it, and I think it was just a little bit different than what was being released at the time. So I think it didn't sell out right away because I think it was just a little too different than what was people were expecting,
Right.
But I think 100% that was a quality project. I think it was like really cool, and I was really excited you sent the print and things like that, which I still have.
Yeah, I'm proud of that project.
And then I don't think I've seen this project before, but it's cool. Like,
yeah, I keep discovering new projects. I think I've seen them all, but then I discover new ones.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. But how do you think? One thing I wanted to talk to you about is we can't have any discussion these days without talking about AI. I think, and what do you think about AI and like its use in the creative process I'm particularly interested in. I've had Eco33, who's done Latent Ink and he's done some great work, and had him on this podcast actually, with Sophia Garcia and Tony from Artix Code, and to talk about this. But I think like it's really my opinion, which I said on the show, is that like I think it's just another tool, right, in the tool chest. And if you can use it in a good way and a bad way, you can create like bad art with it, or you can create great art with it. It's really like, how are you using it? Are you letting it take over your artistic vision and dictate that? Then it's probably not going to be great. Or if you are using it as a tool to augment your artistic vision, like you would a studio assistant or something like that, right? Then I think could be really great. So I don't know. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I see it as just a tool. It's not a tool that I'm currently using, mainly because I've always been drawn to constraints. Before I made art from code, I made art from very extremely strict kind of like geometric systems, which I developed over years. So, and I've always believed that like limitation and constraints is the key to expression. You always use the analogy of a piano, right? I mean, a piano's been around for years. People still learn the piano. They still express themselves with the piano. But a piano has a very limited range of sounds. I mean, compared to the space of all sounds. So, and it has a very limited way of interacting with it, and that's its beauty. So, I guess like code-based art. If code-based art for me is a piano, right? AI seems like a keyboard with all these new sounds and fancy things, and like a little button where I can generate a rhythm and stuff effortlessly. I still feel like, to me, code-based art is still so exciting, and I feel like I'm only scratching the surface of what I want to explore. I have no intentions of using it. Once in a while, I'll if it's like a function that I've forgotten or something, I'll use it just to explain. Well, if you just do a search in Google, right, for a certain JS function, now it comes back with a JS result. So I am using it to that extent, but I feel like I love what I do, so I don't really want to share the experience with AI at this point. And with Gen Art, it's different. I think Gen Art is different. I mean, I think Botto showed us this, right? It's to make Gen Art. It's very for a start, right, we have code, right, which is the most direct way to give a computer instructions, right? Yeah. It's the most direct way to think about algorithms. So like natural language prompting is just this clumsy, stupid way to make algorithms. So you'd have to just take that out of the equation. I'm not going to use natural language to try and direct what I'm doing, because I can think fine with code. I've learned that language. There's no point in taking a step back. And so I don't. AI struggles to make Gen Art at the moment because it's like it has. There's so many big kind of like structures within Gen Art. It's like architecture. It's got all these different levels. They all have to work together, and it involves a lot of comprehension of what you're doing. Whereas AI, I don't know. I mean, it's a contentious issue, right? Whether it actually comprehends anything at all. It doesn't. So, it's just like predictive, right? Next obvious thing.
It's interesting. It's really AI, just like
kind of generalizes, right?
Exactly. No, I can explain it. It's like as a software engineer, like just like very, it's something that I have dug into a lot, and to understand kind of the algorithm and things like that, and it's really amazing that it actually works at all as well as it does, because it really all it is just. It's just a scaling of there is some benefit, some discoveries that they made around some minor things that were really like of figuring out, okay, how to process the data in a way that kind of allows for you to capture not just the next word together, but to realize that different words are related in the same sentence even if they don't appear together. Don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but the core concept of this AI, machine learning, and then LLMs is just a kind of a that on supercharged is just, it's just basically training data, which is at this point is like the entire internet, right? And more, and they're just continuously getting more and more data to throw in these things. And it's just determining, from that data, what's the probabilities that certain words, phrases, in the case of written content, but in images or music, it would be that the tokens would not be words; they would be like pixels or notes, frequencies, etc. But you're taking all this data and then determining basically it's looking at the frequencies that certain words appear with each other, how they appear with each other, etc., building out to phrases, etc., and then training this model that basically is what ends up happening is it just condenses and represents the meaning of language, right? Like in this model, and then when you run it back and you do inference, which is like when you actually type a prompt in there, it's just predicting, that next word based on that prompt. It's like, okay, if this was given as a prompt, what would the answer be? Predict the answer, and then it predicts the answer. But it's really just amazing that it's not conscious or anything like that. It's just a prediction machine, and they have some jitter in there to give it some randomness around there, so that if you don't enter the same prompt twice, it won't give you the exact same thing. It gives you like they want a little bit of jitter so that it's it's not entirely predictable, and also it has some sense of it gives it a little bit more sense of being more human, to give it more of a jitter. And you also can then try, ask something multiple times, and it will give you different responses. Just like how if you set the seed the same every single time in a Gen Art project, the same thing, right? You want to have, some play in the system, but yeah, it's nothing you can really, I think most people could comprehend what AI is, like, of how it actually works. It's just amazing that it actually works as well as it does. You wouldn't think that it would be able to do what it can do with what it actually is on like an algorithmic level. But,
it maybe tell us something about how our own minds work, right? Because I don't know what I'm going to say next, but I'm still speaking, and it's like the next obvious word, right? It comes out of my mouth.
Yes, so, it definitely does, and it makes me think about that a lot. Of like, okay, well, are we just discovering kind of at least maybe an element of what we actually do, right? Like, and
it's only around language, So,
it's interesting with that, but I think the one thing it can't do, which I think you're right, is that it can't. I think we would need a big breakthrough for it to synthesize its own. It can't truly be creative. I think maybe some people would disagree with me on this, but I think it can't make a connection that's not already connected in its training data. Think of it like that, because it's trained by relationships between words, right? And if those words or those concepts, et cetera, are not present in its training data, the whole internet, it's not going to be able to make that by itself, like make that connection. Now, it may be able to if someone in a prompt suggests that connection, it could start to make a cohesive connection between those two and like kind of riff on that, but it's going to take a person to prompt that connection.
I think it's obvious to see when you ask it to write poetry, right? It'll come up with some cheesy rhyming poetry, but it's also obvious and lacks kind of the tension a great poet would add. I always find when I put my own, if I write an essay, I put it in there, I never really like the way it doesn't. It kind of seems like it just rounds off the corners of my own voice. Yeah. And maybe the grammar may be better, but I don't like it. It's just. But I mean, there are although I don't use it a lot, I certainly don't use it when I'm making algorithms. But there are like some artists I love nice aunties. I think there are a few. Well, I mean, there are a few AI artists who can really show their own soul through their work. You know, still, I think Nice Irons is an artist who does that. It's like
Or
you can
Rupe.
really
Have you
see.
seen Vacation, like Rupe?
Right? Yeah.
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 Like I
So
love that work.
yeah,
Like
there's soul in there. There's heart. You can tell. It's almost like I always feel like when I see art, I kind of meet the artist. You know, I have a little look into their soul. So, so yeah, you can still. It's not like you said. It's a tool. You can still make great art with AI. It's just at some point in your journey, you have to decide what tools you want to use and what ones you don't. You know, if you're a painter, do you just because there's a new medium suddenly comes about, you don't necessarily grab it. You know, I'm not going to just jump on AI because it would make my work sell better. It's just like I like what I do at the moment. I just honestly feel like there's so
love
much.
this.
Yeah.
I love this. I don't know. Like this to me is good AI work. Like
Yeah.
like
I like this kind of thing.
the colors, like everything he's captured,
like mine.
Yeah, he's totally captured like that Slim Aarons type era of film, like you know, that color of the Kodachrome or that type of thing, but then added this grotesque, like surrealist element to it that is just weird, but is great.
Who's the guy who drops on Verse, who does the video?
Yeah.
These kind of like videos of like these kind of. They're always like inside trailer parks and people taking look like people, just the dark side of humanity. But I can't remember his name, but I like his stuff.
Yeah, it's great. Like there's so much good. So but then I've seen, like, it's interesting though, about like I've showed some people this art and like some artists that are more the traditional art type thing, and like they do painting and things like that, and they like, I guess they would feel this way, and like all digital art is like, I don't know, they just like have this reaction to it that it's because the person didn't do like they're not like technically making it or something. There's like, they discount it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I guess their argument would be like, painting is a skill and like you're learning that technicality, and like there's something, I don't know about that, I would say, or I don't know what they, I guess I don't want to, I'm trying to steel man their argument, but it's I guess it would be I think they have a problem with it not being, I guess, human, right? Like it's and they would probably say the same thing about gen art, right?
People just have a problem usually with things that are new. It just takes time to,
like, the scale of it, of the fact that you can generate it and it's not you're not making it by hand, or you're not using a like painting or something with a skill, like,
well, it's threatening as well, right?
Because
if you've spent 20 years building a craft, and there's a possibility that anybody can just turn up and make art and sell it for more than you. That's pretty painful, understandably painful for a lot of us.
Yeah, well, even they have all these rules and stuff too, like at some of these places, like where it's like a really, painting place like that, like, oh, you have to, and they're it's funny because, like, with AI, like, it's just like a lot of people get like scared and stuff about, like you're saying, about all this stuff. So like now, like, I've heard from this person that I talked to, who shall remain nameless, that they, at this club that they belong to, that's a kind of like a painting club, they now are saying, like, you can't use AI to generate like even reference images of what you're painting.
Right.
Like that type of stuff. But they already said, like, you can't use a photograph if you didn't take the photograph, right? Like to create a reference. Now they're saying you can't use AI at all to like create even reference images of what to paint and things like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
it's just very different than the way
right?
I think of this stuff. I don't know. Like,
I always try to look at art, I always try to think, well, if we take all the cultural framing away from this work, the things that excite us on a cultural and on an extrinsic level, and we just transport this to 50 years in the future, where actually a lot of the culture is not that interesting anymore, or the conceptual framing has just been, scholars will know it, but what remains is just the intrinsic composition. And I feel like I'm a picture maker. I'm interested in composition and the arrangement of shapes on the canvas. For me, that's always like the thing that interests me. I mean, art can mean different things to different people, but so when I look at art, whether it's AI generated or however it's generated, that's generally how I tend to evaluate it and think, well, is this something that I would want to put on my walls?
Yeah. I don't know. It just seems like very put in a box around it. And I think it's like there shouldn't be many rules in art.
No. It's not to say somebody can't have their own preferences about the sort of things that they enjoy.
Yeah,
I think, or at least if you're an artist, right, you've got to be clear about what you want to make. Otherwise, you'd be going all over the place, wasting your energy, trying to just dip in your toe in a little bits. And I think at some point you've got to kind of make a commitment. It's a bit like personal growth, right? If you're like on the spiritual journey, and you're just trying every different tradition, every different practice, and you can just get addicted to moving from one thing to the other and never really going deep.
Yeah. So on that tangent, wait, let's go there, because I know that you're a big meditator, and we've talked about this before.
Right.
And do you just do meditation in general? Do you do Zen? Do you do something specific, or is it just kind of your own thing?
So the tradition that I've always has really resonated with me for most of my life. Less and less actually, but still, it's like formed the bedrock of my own practices. Is Zen, Soto Zen in particular, and so the key practice in that tradition is called Shakuntaza, and translating that from Japanese, this means just sitting.
Yes.
So just sitting. Oh, it sounds like, well, yeah, it's easy to just sit. But of course, when we sit, we're not just sitting, right? We've got an idea of what we're trying to do. We're trying to get somewhere. Maybe we're trying to have a special experience. We're trying to understand something. We're doing everything but sitting usually. we're daydreaming. We're trying to keep a good part. But so just sitting is this really sort of pure, like open experience to everything. So you become like a mirror and just reflect whatever appears.
Yeah.
So eventually you become just the sitting body, which, like, I would say it's, on the face of it sounds incredibly difficult. I mean, it sounds easy, and in a sense it is. It's the easiest thing for us to do. It's the most natural thing for us to do. Think of like a baby, right? It's just been born and knows nothing about the world, hasn't developed the faculty of thinking. It's that natural state that we're trying to get back to in this particular practice. And that type of practice does form the basis of a lot of other sort of, like, even in Christianity, there's a type of prayer like abiding in God, whatever, which is very similar to that, So it's that practice which I do now, and it hasn't always been that way. I think earlier on, when years ago, I was more what we call Zen Rinzai, where you're trying to get to this, it's more of a convert where you're focusing on something,
Yeah.
Whereas this is much more of like an opening. So, and that's what I do. Ideally, you could do that in your whole life, but it's very difficult unless you make that time each day to do it.
Yeah.
I've very been, Web3 is the thing. My success as an artist has been the biggest test for me, and it's been the biggest temptation and the thing that pulled me away from that core practice. Because when I was younger, I was very, very dedicated, and but I'm building my practice back up after the Web3 onslaught, and already I do feel the impact it does. You're not going to start. You're not going to start meditating necessarily and start feeling the impact for immediately you might feel a little bit, but eventually it does start to really trickle down into
in your everyday
your whole
life.
life and
Yeah,
brings you
I heard of
perspective.
it. I heard of it mainly when I first started here. It was like, when I worked at Proof, where Kevin Rose, is CEO, and he does Zen. He does it with like his main teacher is Henry Shookman.
Yeah, I know that guy. Yeah.
Who's in New Mexico, and he actually has an app now, which I've been trying, which is The Way, which
Right.
is
That's
pretty
good,
cool. I definitely enjoy it. I think it's probably the best meditation app I've ever tried. And it's just the way why he calls it The Way is because it's not like like with Headspace and all these other, there's all these choices and like it's you can choose everything. And in his app, which I think is smart, it's very focused. Like, no, there's only one path you kind of follow. And I think it's really cool that the way he structured it, and also the way he's explained some of these concepts, of mindfulness and awareness, and support is another one that he talks about.
Right.
And it's really interesting. And awakening, I think maybe I mentioned that already, but
Yeah, Henry is from a Zen background, but he's kind of he's brought it much more into the kind of like made it more accessible to Western culture, maybe.
yeah, I think his like where the lineage he comes from or whatever is more in that vein, right? They kind of brought
Yeah.
it to a Western audience from Japan and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think it was a mixture of, if I remember correctly, between those two schools, like the Rinzai and the Soto school. It's like a mixture of the two, really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Zen is very. One thing I realized after a number of years is how much sort of like samurai culture is kind of shaped.
Yeah, but it's very strange to me. Like it
Yeah.
almost seems when I've looked into it more, and I've been like looking into it, I almost, and maybe it's just this is not the way to look at it, but it's like it almost. I guess the thing is that it's almost contradictory in a way. There's some contradiction to it because, at least in my mind, and maybe it's just because I'm not educated enough, because there's all this structure and almost rules and things like that. Yet, like, I feel like what the idea is to show the folly of all that, right? Of even reality, right? Like that's the at least the purported, what meditation and this stuff is about, right? Is to kind of like drop those walls, right?
Right.
But it's kind of like there's a lot of walls, so I'm just confused about that.
I think Nisargadatta, which is from a completely different tradition in India, like Ramana Maharshi, that type of thing. I think he said something like, an indication of the awakened mind is like the ability to live with paradox.
Yeah,
To not live on those extremes, you're right. Like a deep practice is it's like going beyond duality, right? So it goes beyond, it totally embraces paradox where two things are equally true at the same time. And but yeah, the rules in things like Rinzai and stuff are there to, if you're following a practice like that, then we're beginners, right? We're all we need structure in order to go beyond structure.
Yeah.
Because we're just crazy, from the day one we've been on this planet, we've been learning all these habits about kind of like that end up in this view that we're separate beings in this world, and that we live in this sort of very dualistic world of hot and cold, life and death, right and wrong.
Yeah.
And that becomes our reality. But that's kind of a madness, and so we need this sort of structure to help us.
Yeah, I mean, the
process.
most I've gotten out of it is just at least the thought that resonates me with the most. Actually, it was like probably like Sam Harris's like Waking Up app that he actually said this, and I was like, it made me at least start to get it. Was kind of like this whole idea of like, oh, you can be mindful like in like on a bus in like when everything is loud, and just by getting curious about a certain sound or something like that, and then focusing on that sound and just trying to hear that sound purely, and and not in a cognitive like thinking of it way, kind of just like, can you hear that sound clearly, almost like a musician would, in kind of in the same thing. Then bringing it to the breath, right? Focusing on the sensation of the breath in your nostrils, things like that. That has helped me a lot, like get it a little bit more about that. And then the same thing about distractions. Okay, you think of something, your mind starts racing in meditation or something like that. It's like, I think, some people look at that and they think it's a failure and they're like, oh no, like, like that or something like that. They get like stressed out by it. Like they're not supposed to be doing that. But it's like, and Henry says too, is like, get curious about that. Like, what's like, it's a sense of curiosity, right? About, of just in trying to get to the raw experience, right? Which is, I don't know, at least for me, it has definitely unlocked some insight in the mindfulness realm. And it's so important because, at least for me, I think everybody, but definitely me, I've said, I don't know if I said it on this podcast, but I'm ADHD. Like that's something that, I think a lot of us artists are, diagnosed or not. But it's something that, and I think one thing that the more the research they've done with ADHD, they find out that, there's this element when they do brain scans of it's called the demon. It's like Howell calls it the demon, but it's a default mode network. And it's this aspect of, and when you're everyone goes into this default mode network in their brain, and when you do it, it's kind of when you're thinking about either the past or the future, and you're thinking or you're visualizing something or you're dreaming about something. Like it can be very positive, it also can be negative, but it's when you're out of your sensory experience and you're in this, you're not in the present, right? And mindfulness can really help to realize what they found is that people with ADHD, they either go into this mode that is this default mode network mode more often than, neurotypical people. And then also they sometimes, if they do the brain scans, when they're supposed to be in a, not that mode is like partially enabled. So it's like they're dreaming while they're trying to do a task or something, like that type of thing. So it's interesting, but I think meditation helps to realize when you are in that mode that to bring attention back to the present. I definitely in my own life feel like I'm getting more in the practice awareness of that, okay, I am now thinking about the past or I'm thinking about the future right now and I'm not present now. I'm not in my body. And to try to like be able to, if you choose to redirect back into the present, right? And the more you practice that muscle, the more you get better at being able to stay in the present, right? Or at least realize that you're diverting from it, right?
Right. And it's amazing what we miss when we're not in the present, right?
Yes.
I mean, the more in the present you become, you think, wow, did I spend my whole life, completely oblivious to what I'm seeing now,
Yeah.
I mean, it might just be...
It doesn't, and the thing is, like,
grass.
I don't know who said it, but it's like the past and the future don't exist. Like the only thing that exists is the present, right?
Right.
It's just a fabrication in your mind of what you're remembering and things like that. So, yeah. But yeah, it's so, yeah, meditation, that stuff, I think it's really, super important and just helpful too. Not only just important, but like just helpful to, especially where, we have such constant 24/7 news and all this information, and you have so many competition, everything's competing for your attention, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, when I got the opportunity to drop on art blocks, 3 years ago now, whatever, I did, my practice fell apart and my life did change.
Yeah.
My life did get harder.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. I was,
and I became more fragmented. I felt like, my core had fragmented after, it took like good 2-3 years for it for me to think, shit, I know I really need to address this, because I was kind of coasting maybe on the 25 years of practice I had before.
Yeah.
And really starting to take it seriously, that I was ignoring maybe the most important thing that we have to do. Like it's like you're chasing this treasure, right? As an artist in Web3, whatever the success is, treasure, but the treasure is tiny in comparison to the great treasure of just being at peace. Just knowing yourself. I wouldn't even say at peace, but knowing yourself, knowing you.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, we talk about the provenance and all this stuff like that, but in reality, it's like, like even like,
yeah.
Think about it. How far back can we even go? Like 5,000 BC, or
right. Michelangelo will be forgotten one day.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like
10,000 years.
Humans are 200,000 years old. We think. I mean, maybe older, but it's just like there's no chance that any of us is going to be remembered long. I mean, we'll remember maybe in our own brains and own consciousness, or whatever we want to call it, maybe in that sense. But in a collective sense of future humans or future beings or whatever, at least on Earth, or it's like the chances of being in recorded history like that are like nothing. As you expand time out, so that can be, I think, frustrating, but it also can be freeing in a way too, if you look at it, that there really isn't all this. And I think this is the Stoics kind of really talk about this. It's that thought can also be freeing, because it's like there's no pressure. It takes the pressure down.
Right.
Like it's really not that important in the scheme of things.
Right. I mean, to begin with, that type of contemplation, you're contemplating your own demise, the impermanence of things is terrifying to begin with, but ultimately it's like the key to gaining, like you say, freedom.
Yeah, because and I think it's a balance, right? It's natural to be afraid of death and be afraid of, and to want to, and I think it's 100% a balance, and especially having, as you have children, family, and things like that. Like before that time, I was like into Stoicism and things like that, and but I've come to the point that it's 100% a balance, because you don't want to be completely detached, because that's not healthy either. You won't experience the depth of in the joy of a family and people that you love, and your children, and now for you, grandchildren, but you also don't want to go the other direction and just be completely attached, where you are unrealistic about the reality of the world, right? And of everything, right? So it's a balance between that I think is kind of that, I guess that's a lot of philosophies, right? It's the golden mean, right?
Right. If you look at like Buddhist, Indian philosophy, it's all about avoiding extreme views, It's all the midway. I mean, Buddhism is called the midway, It's all about, because often we'll be in an extreme view and we'll have no, we don't know,
Yeah, it's very easy. We want to do that because I think it makes it simple.
It feels permanent. It gives us a sense of certainty, right?
Yeah.
I guess another thing that maybe this type of journey, this type of like inner practice does for us, is it enables us to live with less certainty. I say with no certainty, but enables us to. We want certainty more than anything else, We will choose to believe we're the worst person on earth rather than just not know.
Yeah.
We'll choose any certainty over just really not know, being able to say, I don't know what's going to happen next in my life,
Yeah.
But if you can, it's a great place to be.
Amazing.
I'm not saying I am. I mean,
we're all on the journey. That's what it is. All right, Harvey. I think we can call it here for this round. But thank you for joining. I always enjoy. I love how we have these long conversations. I'd love to do this again. I love to do this with more guests.
It's been great.
I love how this is like a thing now, where on more podcasts they're doing these long discussions, and I think I think that like going long like this is really, it's when really cool stuff happens. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's where you learn about who the artist really is, right? Or the guest and the presenter.
And the
Yeah.
thing is too is like, so I want to, just double back on, we're recording this on Monday on the 18th, but it'll be out, I'm trying to get it out before your release. And which will be on Wednesday. What time on Wednesday on 20th?
Well, the it opens actually 9 just for my top 100 holders,
Yep.
and Black Dragon owners, and then that's till 12, and then from 12 till 2 is all my other holders, and then it's public at 2.
Okay. Yeah, and then that will be right on Art Block.
I think it's some of my best work for sure.
Yeah,
I'm
I think
really,
it's
really
I think
proud
it's
of it.
combining a lot of different things that you've worked on in a really but it feels like a really new way, and also just a way that has, like you said, a lot of range in this algorithm for sure. A lot of different emotional range as well, which is there's definitely pieces that feel dark, like we said. There's pieces that feel very airy and light, and kind of in between. Said some pop art elements, some abstract expressionism. It's got it all. So I think everybody's going to be able to, if they don't even mint one, browse the secondary, because you'll be able to find an output that you like. I guarantee that. So looking forward to it. I'll definitely be trying to mint. Thanks for joining, Harvey. It's so great to talk to you, and let's do this again soon.
Yeah, let's do it anytime, man. Pleasure.
Sounds
really
good.
good to be here. Yeah.